at the same time, what I think this is pointing to is the administration responding to live concerns about how the war is being prosecuted, and also future concerns, as he was speaking there, to sort of the strategic imperative of not taking actions now that will plant the seeds for future conflict, future hostilities.
In that we're creating terrorists
exactly
by killing civilians in this case. Not that the U.S. is doing it, but our support is there, and a lot of people see the administration's fingerprints on this. Is that fair?
I think that's exactly how a lot of people are looking at it. The U.S. is one of the major backers of Israel, not just politically, diplomatically in the UN, but also in terms of military assistance. And in fact, that's very much a live issue right now, with the administration asking Congress for additional support to provide Israel with things like Iron Dome interceptors and additional material that's being used at this very moment.
Israel says, what do you want from us? We were attacked. We didn't tell you what to do after 9/11. And Hamas is literally surrounding itself by civilians. So how do you neutralize that threat without collateral damage?
It's an incredibly challenging environment from a military perspective, tactically speaking. As you noted, there's not a lot of strategic depth here. The insurgents that Israel is aiming against are oftentimes co-located or in very close proximity to civilian infrastructure. And I think that's where the concern comes in. The other concern that the Israeli forces have is, about things like airstrikes, which from a distant perspective seem to be not targeted enough. And why aren't they using more ground forces? The concern from the other perspective is that is an incredibly hostile and dangerous environment. And having those sort of advanced airstrikes is meant to help protect Israeli forces when they do eventually send in ground troops. But it's a very complicated situation. I think the other thing I'd flag is it's a very complicated information environment. There's a lot of different narratives out there, and it makes it really hard to get ground truth.
Well, boy, that's for sure. Look, this is your area of expertise. Is it fair to criticize Israel then? Is it possible to be more strategic, or is it easy for politicians to suggest as much?
I mean, I think there's a lot of different perspectives at play here, right? And I think where I would say the administration is coming from is the perspective of still very much backing Israel. They're still trying to send military support to Israel. They're still backing it in the diplomatic field. But the comments over the weekend point to the fact that they're also using that influence, that leverage, that relationship with Israel to push them not just in the direction that I think serves American interests, but from their strategic perspective will ultimately in the long term serve Israeli interests as well. And that's, I think, some of the movement you're starting to see right now publicly, but it's been happening behind closed doors, I think, since October 7th, probably.
That can be a tough message to sell, obviously, in this environment. But we're seeing U.S. warships attacked on the regular, it seems like. We had another one last week, just over the weekend now in the Red Sea. A warship attacked over the course of, I think, 7 hours, downed 3 different drones, and issued quite a statement here talking about the threats from Iran proxies. If I could pull this up here, Central Command says the attacks were fully enabled by Iran in response to the Israel-Hamas war. If that's the case, has the second front opened?
I mean, I think this has been kind of an ongoing challenge, right, is the issue of these proxy battles that are happening. And it started very soon after October 7th. I mean, Hamas itself is backed by Iran. Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, which has also been very much engaged and active, is also backed by Iran. And then now you have the Houthis involved as well. So I don't think this is necessarily a brand new development. It's certainly an escalation of the situation. And I think from markets perspective, the concern is going to be, is this putting some of those key trade routes at risk? I think at this point, I have pretty high confidence that certainly the U.S. Navy and other forces in the region are in control of the situation and will be able to manage the risk. But I think every time this news story pops up, it leads to this concern of, this is a key choke point. Is this going to get into more of a fray that blocks traffic?
Right, yeah. Do we send more assets to the region?
We've already got quite a lot of assets there. Yeah, exactly. And
we start using them more, Jenny?
Well, I think they've been used pretty effectively defensively, right? And I mean, one of the things to underscore here, which might be an obvious point, is yes, some of these forces are very well trained and well equipped, but compared to a major military like the United States, it's a really asymmetric sort of battle here. And in particular, when it comes to our ability to provide air cover and larger defense, I think that's where our strength is, less so focused on numbers and more in terms of quality of our systems.
So what are we in for here? They're dropping leaflets. They've put out maps now that cut Gaza into 2,400 blocks. It's getting that specific, telling people where to move, where to leave. Israel's asking for credit, by the way, when it comes to that, saying that they are trying to spare civilian lives. But we've got a list of areas to be evacuated at 34 now, up from 19 the day earlier. What are we about to see in southern Gaza?
Well, I think that's part of the concern is that that's, as you noted, where all the civilians from the north have moved down into. And it takes time to move people. It takes time for people to get the information that they need to move. And in some cases, they might not be able to, not only be if they have injured folks who aren't able to move, but Israeli forces have said before that they suspect Hamas might be forcing people to stay in place to provide that kind of civilian shield cover that we're very concerned about. So I think what we're looking at is a major operation that's going to be moving south. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of this debate coming out into the open about how do we do that in a way that, at best possible, tries to preserve civilian life.